Welcome back. You're watching CNBC TV18, and we are in an exclusive conversation with John Podesta, White House Senior Advisor to the President on climate policy, and we're discussing the next steps in the India-US energy partnership and how can we take the partnership forward. John Podesta, thank you for being with CNBC TV18. Now, when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act, now this is a very important legislation in terms of how US companies do businesses and how countries like India, which are importing goods into the United States, exporting goods into the United States, do business. Has it really worked to the extent you would have envisaged? Because just to give you an example, Tesla was a company which was keenly exploring India as a market for manufacturing electric vehicles. Elon Musk was supposed to come to India, but that visit got postponed. We saw him going to China. So despite the IRA, do you see American companies shifting from China as fast as enough as you would have wanted?
Well, it's sort of hard to explain Elon Musk these days, but beyond that, I admire his success with Tesla and SpaceX. But they make their own private sector decisions, obviously. We'd like to see again a more secure set of supply chains. I think American companies are keenly aware of that. They're moving production, quite frankly, to Southeast Asia. I think India can take more advantage of that. I think the Indian government probably needs to do some work to be more a more attractive destination for that investment, to diversify supply chains across the board, not just in these sectors that we've been talking about. But I think that I think particularly with respect to electric vehicles, India is a leader in the two-wheel, three-wheel vehicle space. I think there's ways that we can work together, U.S., India, in partnership with countries in the region and in Africa, for example, in Tanzania, in Kenya, to deploy new technologies that we can partner together to try to find the funding resources, the technological resources, the manufacturing know-how to create those win-win situations that I talked about.
Right. When it comes to stepping up supply chains in India and making sure you attract those China plus investments or that can come, or investments going to Vietnam that can come to India, where are the areas where you think India needs to work on?
Well, look, I think where you need incoming sources of supply, I think some of the tariffs are quite high here. I think the ease of doing business in India is notoriously sometimes hard to deal with for foreign-based companies. But I think in general, what the successive Indian governments have tried to do is open up the business environment, seek more for direct investment, try to create that strong engine of job growth. We've done that in the U.S. We've seen a lot of foreign direct investment in the U.S. There's, as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, just since the President Biden and Vice President Harris have come into office, there have been $415 billion of investments announced in the clean energy and clean tech sectors, more still in semiconductors and other areas. We've seen a resurrection of manufacturing in the United States. But I think one of the things I hear from companies is in the United States is there are issues around permitting, et cetera. But the transparency of our system of applying the direct support through the tax code that we have in the Inflation Reduction Act, you know what you need to do in order to take advantage of those tax credits. They're shaped to influence how companies are investing by investing in disadvantaged communities, in traditional energy communities that have often been left out. They support good jobs by paying prevailing wage. All of that has created a virtuous cycle of investment, and we're seeing that spread across, and it's been why I think amongst the advanced economies, the U.S. has done quite well compared to other peer economies coming out of the COVID crisis, and why we've seen record job growth in the United States.
Right. My final two questions. We just have about a minute left, Mr. Podesta. What I would like to ask you, the U.S. has imposed a series of tariffs on China to prevent that unfair advantage for them. Could we see more measures to come? And considering the friction over trade and climate with China, what are some of the measures that we can expect from the U.S.?
Well, look, I think that there's no question we're in a period of high friction because of the overcapacity that we see in the Chinese economy, and the fact that that has created distortion across the globe. It's not just the United States that feels this way. Europe is imposing tariffs on electric vehicles because of dumping into the European market. We've seen the same thing in solar and wind. And they've doubled down on this problem of overcapacity. They have an overcapacity in coal-fired power, which they use to subsidize the industrial production, which is bad for the planet and bad for climate change. So we have this friction. Nevertheless, we need to continue to talk to representatives of the PRC. I hosted my Chinese counterpart in Washington. I'm headed to China in the near future for further discussions, because I think we owe it to the citizens of both of our countries, as well as to the people of the planet, to try to find areas where we can cooperate, to find strategies where we can reduce emissions. We've had some success in the non-CO2 space, in methane, N2O, nitrous oxide, to begin discussions about how we reduce emissions there. I think that's very important for the world, that we stay on track. I worked, as you know, for President Obama, where we negotiated a joint statement in advance of the Paris Agreement that I think was very constructive in finding agreement. The president, following that, came here to India for Republic Day, had excellent discussions with Prime Minister Modi, and I think that was instrumental in being able to close a deal, creating the Paris structure, so that even in periods of high tension, we need to keep talking to each other, try to find common ground, try to find a path forward to move towards a cleaner environment, which is in interest of, again, all of humanity, and in solving this really existential crisis of climate change.
And finally, U.S. is in election mode. Tomorrow, if the Democrats don't win the election, do you feel that this climate agenda that you have right now could be derailed?
Well, I think the investments that we're seeing coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, I'll use my term, they're very sticky. You know, they're being made, communities are benefiting from it, workers are going to work. We've seen 20,000 jobs a month for the last over 18 months in construction, just building structures to be able to house these clean energy investments. So I think they're very sticky, but there's no question that in our system, we saw what the previous president, who's on the ballot again, did. He turned his back, pulled out of Paris, rejected climate change, versus what Vice President Harris is putting forward to the American people. There's a stark difference in my current job. I can't get involved in politics, but I think the American people know there's two very different paths in terms of American leadership in the world on climate, in terms of the kinds of policies they pursue at a regulatory, from a regulatory agenda. But I think the investment side, the American people are strongly supportive of what we've been able to do, and the jobs and the investment and the business formation and the innovation that we've seen as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think that's going to stay no matter what the constellation of lineup is in the Congress and in the White House. But on these other measures, they're pretty different visions of what we need to do for the world.
John Podesta, thank you so much for joining us here on CNBC TV18 and giving us your very important vision for the India-US Energy Alliance for the future, not just for the benefit of both of our countries, but for the world as well. Thank you once again for being with us. All right, with that, we come to the end of our special interview. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.